Hey everybody, it's the one and only Nicky V here, and to give you guys an update on the fantasy league I had planned for tonight, it didn't work out. Not enough people showed up, so yeah, I'm just gonna be content with my 4 fantasy leagues and move on. I'm also instead of doing the fantasy league, I'm going to be doing a probably going to be doing like an Ask Nicky V's thing. Like you ask me some fantasy questions, I'll give you answers. Like should I start this guy? Should I sit this guy? The like. So anyway, moving on. This episode is about the number 6 team on the Juggernaut Index, the San Diego Chargers. Even if holdout wide receiver Vincent Jackson never reports, the San Diego offense is going to look awfully good. Let's start there. Given the depth and talent in the Chargers receiver corps, it's not hard to understand why the team is unwilling to give Jackson a $50 million deal. Sure, he's coming off of back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, but he's also coming off of back-to-back DWI arrests. He's been suspended by the NFL for the first 3 games of the 2010 season for violations to the league's personal conduct policy. On top of that, San Diego has placed Jackson on the roster exempt list, initiating a 3-game suspension that begins when he signs and reports. Here's where it gets tricky. Because Jackson cannot return to the team while serving his league-mandated suspension, he'll need to sign by September 4th, which he didn't, in order to avoid the additional 3-game penalty imposed by the Chargers. If he were to report today, which seems galactically unlikely, but you never know, but he didn't, then he could serve the suspensions concurrently. If Jackson fails to agree to his lowball 1-year tender by the roster cut-down date, then he's guaranteed to miss at least 6 games. He recently told NFL Network's Jason LaConfra that he's willing to sit out the entire season if necessary. So 6 games is beginning to look like a best-case scenario, although a trade to a receiver-needy team like Minnesota wouldn't hurt. Thus, drafting Jackson in a fantasy league is a bit of a dice roll. Do it late if you're planning on doing it at all. Don't be the guy who drafts Vincent Jackson in round 3 because you're relying on a cheat sheet from a magazine. Those things really should have expiration dates. Okay, now that Jackson's situation has been covered, let's shift gears and discuss players who will actually appear on the field for San Diego in Week 1. The primary target in this receiver corps was never V-Jax. As most of you know, tight end Antonio Gates has led the team in receptions in each of his past 6 seasons. He quietly, noisily put together a convincing Hall of Fame resume, and he just established a new career high in receiving yards last season with 1,157. In most fantasy drafts, Gates will be either the first or the second tight end off the board. His mock draft central ADP is 44.5 at the moment. Yes, the position is deep, but Gates is basically a sure thing. In his worst season, an injury-marred 2008, he still delivered 8 touchdowns and finished as the number 4 scorer at his position. At 6'4", 260, Gates is obviously an inviting red zone presence. He shares the single-season record for receiving touchdowns by a tight end, with 13. When Gates is teamed with the 6'5" Malcolm Floyd and the 6'2" Legadou Nene, or the 6'5" Jackson, the Chargers present a matchup nightmare for opposing defenses. Good luck dealing with that group if you've got a pair of speedy, smallish corners. San Diego loves to put Floyd in single coverage jump ball situations. He's averaged 17.2 yards per catch in each of his past 2 years. This year, he's in line for more targets and an expansion of his route running responsibilities. Floyd caught 4 passes for 51 yards and a score in the Chargers' 3rd preseason game, and was targeted 8 times. If he can carry that production into the regular season, then Jackson will basically have no leverage. Nene is an intriguing wideout in his own right, and his draft day price tag isn't so intimidating, ADP of 259.0. He's a no-risk pick with a high ceiling. Nene is buried in the Yahoo pre-ranks right now, so you can usually snag him in the final rounds. He's suddenly a key receiver for a team that totaled 29 passing touchdowns in 2009. Don't sleep on him. Buster Davis hasn't presented a serious challenge to Nene in camp. Lately, Davis is running with Billy Volek in the backups. At some point, we need to mention Philip Rivers is unquestionably among the league's best quarterbacks. We probably shouldn't have waited this long to say it. Rivers is remarkably efficient, having passed for 8,263 yards and 62 touchdowns over the past 2 seasons, despite averaging only 482 attempts per year. For comparison's sake, Matt Schaub attempted 583 last season. Tony Romo had 550. David Garrard had 516. And Jason Campbell 507. Rivers finished among the top 10 fantasy scorers at the position last year, despite the fact that he tied for 18th in total pass attempts. So, yeah, he's great. You won't regret owning him in fantasy, even if he annoys you endlessly in real life. Many of you are too conservative to ever use a first or second round draft pick on a rookie running back, so you'll miss out on Ryan Matthews this year. That's a shame, because he's going to be a serious fantasy asset. Assuming Matthews stays healthy, he's a decent bet to be a mid to late first round pick in 2011. He appears to have the skill set of an every down back, and he definitely has the size, 6'0", 218. Matthews is having an impressive preseason too. 34 carries, 146 yards, with 5 receptions. The only thing he's lacking is a second T in his last name. Annoying, but we'll all get used to it. Matthews should get the every down work, while Darren Sproles remains a situational third down back. Sproles received 138 touches last year, which seems close to the limit for a teacup running back. He's 5'6", 185. Mike Tolbert and Jacob Hester lurk as short yardage goal line threats. Those two may present the most significant threat to Matthews' fantasy value in 2010. LaDainian and Tomlinson received 56 red zone looks for San Diego last season because Norv Turner apparently owned him in a dozen fantasy leagues. Matthews isn't likely to get that sort of workload near the goal line, at least not yet. Nonetheless, Turner has gone on record projecting a significant workload for his rookie back. Here's the key quote from the post-draft Q&A with the San Diego Union Tribune. Question: how many carries do you think Matthews would have as a rookie? Answer: that is so hard to say because there are games that come up like the Tennessee game and the Denver game last season where you run the ball 40 times. I'd like every game to be that way. Unfortunately, it's not. But I would expect Ryan to have 250 carries and 40 catches, something like that. That's obviously saying Darren is going to have the same role he's had. Tip of the cap to Kevin Acey for his asking the critical fantasy questions. Much appreciated. If Matthews gets anything close to 290 touches in this offense, his fantasy owners will like the results. San Diego's defense was fairly ordinary last season as a fantasy commodity, despite the fact that two of the NFL's least productive offenses reside in the AFC West, Oakland and Kansas City. Veteran nose tackle Jamal Williams is now gone, as is cornerback Antonio Cromartie. We've ranked the Chargers' defense 12th for fantasy purposes, but that might simply be a force of habit selection. The only IDP option here is safety Eric Weddle, a guy who can pile up tackles when he's right. Stephen Cooper and Sean Phillips are on the IDP radar too, but they're basically roster filler. If you're drafting a 2007 league, then by all means, take Sean Merriman. And that's the Bolts Report. Please enjoy the Rolf. By the way, sorry this has been so shaky. The camera's on my legs. Earthquake!